Heavens to Betsey.
Podcasting from Studio 502 here in the Midwest, home of the meandering Fox Valley Bike Trail and other oddities. This is Life's Learning Curve, a podcast that helps us find the best us. The best we can be using storytelling. And I'm your host, Paul Hart, former educator and current tech media producer. We're in Season 3, Episode 40. I'm so glad you're with us today. You are in for a real treat. Today's keywords on the podcast: malnourished heart, mommy issues, 3 generations of women, the Persian Prince, the Chateau Louise University for low self-esteem, and at the heart of this broad learning curve story is our main character, Mary Wagner. Now, Mary is entrusted to watch and befriend a physically and mentally handicapped, same-aged girl named Betsey. Our guest today is an author. She's going to share with us today some of her fact-filled yet elaborated, one-of-a-kind life experiences. And this was not just any ordinary life. Wow. So let's get this going. Sebastian. Life's Learning Curve. I'm Paul Hart. Episode Heavens to Betsey. Author Mary McDowell. Stand by. Welcome back to Life's Learning Curve. Today we have with us a guest. A good guest. An author. And also, this is somebody who is an active driver for children's charities, Mary McDowell. Hi.
Hi, Paul.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Where are you coming to us from today?
I am in Colleyville, Texas. I'm sure you don't know where that is, but it's right in the middle between Dallas and Fort Worth.
My daughter's down there, but she's probably about a 2 days drive away.
Well, I could get on a tuna can and probably see her because we're so flat here.
A tuna can. That's interesting. I'm writing that down. I'm saving that. Hey, tell us a little bit about your background.
That's an interesting question. When I went to interview for an airline stewardess position, that was the one question they asked me, and I couldn't answer it. I was speechless. So my background is I was born and raised in Illinois, and spent 19 years of my life there before moving out to California, where there I got married, had 3 children, and we were in that 89 earthquake, and that's when we decided to get out of California and move to Texas.
That'll do it.
And been here for a while.
I got a chance to read your book, and it's called Heavens to Betsey, Betsey. And thank you for putting an E in there because it's easy to search for online. Very easy. Was that on purpose?
No, that's actually the way. In my book, I used everybody's real first name, but changed the last name. Okay. So it was the way that name was spelled.
I had a chance to read your book last month. I have to tell you, it was like, I don't know if you remember the Kellogg's Variety Pack when we were growing up, where you'd have these cereals in boxes, and you'd rip them open, and sometimes it'd be cornflakes, and sometimes it'd be sugar puffs, and sometimes it'd be Frosted Flakes, whatever. But you could pick out the one that you wanted as long as you got there before your siblings. And that's what your book is like to me, because you can't throw it in a category and say, oh, this is crime, this is mystery, this is drama, this is just a plain narrative about somebody's. It hits all of those, and that's why it's so fun to read, because of that. Was that, you're welcome. In general, and this is hard, but what was your book about?
It's a personal memoir. It's a fictional tale, but it is based on the real facts of my life. And it spans 3 generations of women struggling to gain their independence from the traditional roles. And it speaks out to anybody that has any mommy dearest issues, which I did. And it's also an unfolding tale of a young woman searching for love and attention in all the wrong places. The
story's quite inspirational. It's a page turner, as I call it. The main character is craving love and acceptance, and trying to build that self-esteem back up. She learns to trust her gut in the story, and she finds forgiveness through her belief systems. Pretty cool. What I liked is the progression of growth that your character, main character, was Mary Wagner. And that's cool too. You used your name Mary because if you write using your own name, you're going to pull in all those same feelings. If you write under a different first name, you're going to be looking, well, how does this character feel about this? Well, you're already a fully developed character, real person, so you know how you feel about this situation.
It was an easy way to start for my first book, to write about something that I knew, that I actually experienced. So it was a good first book.
But it has some embellishment within it, I'm sure.
Everything's embellished.
Good. Because that's what makes your story.
Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. and I didn't.
Mark Twain.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In the first few chapters, what was the family setup for Mary Wagner?
Mary Wagner and myself actually had 10 brothers and sisters. And so my parents owned a nursing home for the mentally disabled children. Okay. So here we are, all these brothers and sisters growing up actually in this nursing home. And it was there that my mother received a patient who was my same age. Her name was Betsey. She was severely mentally disabled with physical disabilities as well. And because we were the same age, my mother thought it would be very good for me to watch over her. So when I wasn't in school, or on the weekends, that was my job as part of the Wagner household, to watch over this 10-year-old girl.
Let's talk a bit about Mary's parents in the story. How did they contrast with each other?
My mom and dad were the most amazing people in what they did for a living. Yeah. So they have all these children, and then they still have this time and energy left over to take care of other children. So my mom and dad were very work oriented, and they were very disciplined people. And my mother was more the disciplinarian than my father was. So if I needed a hug and a kiss, I went to my dad. Yeah. If I wanted to be reprimanded or told how to be, that was my mom's job. So they were very different, but they worked so well together.
Writing. Have you always written?
Never. No, never.
Really?
No. In fact, I wasn't very good in school, but my favorite subject was English. Yeah. Not the grammar part of it, just the creative part of writing. And that was in 7th grade. And I never thought about it till after I had several small careers. Yes. And I just came to a point in my life where I needed to write down a few confessions, and I thought it was a good way to kind of revisit my past, and also to leave for my children to know where I came from. And it started out just as a few pages, but then very soon turned into a book.
People remember things, I think, through emotion or through sensory. There was a part that you needed to probably purge and get out first.
I will never forget this day that I looked in the mirror. I had just retired without benefits, and I was looking in the mirror, seeing how old I was and seeing the wrinkles come.
You do that? Huh?
Yeah, and I would go, I would lift up and I'd go, this is me at 19. And this is me at 50. And so I would look and go, oh my gosh, I look just like my mother. And that really irritated me a bit. And all these emotions kind of came flooding to the forefront of my head. And they all had to do with the nursing home, and with this patient that I was forced to watch over, and the guilt that I had because I didn't do it the right way. And if I could go back and do it over, what is it that I would do? And that's when I decided to start writing things down.
Had you put those feelings and emotions, had you put them away? Had you put them in the lunch pail for a lot of years?
Never thought about them. Life was too busy.
Really?
I had 3 girls of my own.
Right.
My husband and I were working very hard, full-time jobs.
Yeah.
And it never had the time to sit and relax and think about those things. Or I should say, never had the luxury to think about them.
Right. And in your book, you use lunch pail as a literal lunch pail that you kept things in, special things in. But then figuratively, it kind of turns into this lunch pail where emotions are kept and where treasured things are kept and kind of almost spiritually magical things might happen. How's your lunch pail today?
Well, I cleaned out my lunch pail because of the book that I wrote. So I don't have to go back and revisit all those things that were pent up inside. But do you remember your first lunch pail when you were young?
Yes.
Do you remember who was on the front of your lunch pail?
It was the Beverly Hillbillies.
That show.
Before that, there was bags. We had to carry bags, and my mom said, you can carry bags. You don't have to have a lunch pail.
See, mine was Buffy and Jody from The Family Affair.
Yeah.
Do you remember that show?
I do.
That was the one. It was the father that he lost his wife.
Brian Keith.
And they lived in this penthouse apartment, and they had a butler. Oh my gosh, I would have loved to have lived that life.
Interesting.
Comparatively to what mine was like.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
So.
it was this kind of this dream getaway for these kids, and they go to live with their Uncle Bill. Anyway, so Uncle Bill, it was like Brian Keith had done all these movie roles, but he was just kind of like phoning this one in, where he was like a football player who was bored through most of the show. He'd be like, he'd be rubbing his face, yelling for his manservant, French. But then there was the Buffy and Jody and Sissy, right? Yeah.
Oh, I wanted a French. I wanted to be around a French.
Yeah,
be taken care of like that. Yeah.
Your manservant.
No, my lunch pail back then, just like in real life, was crusty and dirty and disgusting. We didn't clean them out all the time. So if you left any leftover food in there, it'd be moldy. That's how my lunch pail was. I kept that inside for so many years. And so it was real easy to come up with that I was able to finally clean my lunch pail out by writing the book.
Would you like to see this as a film?
Paul, I contemplated writing a screenplay. I thought, it can't be that hard. Yeah. So I went online and I looked at examples of how to write one. In fact, I think it probably might be easier writing a screenplay instead of getting into all the details and the emotion, because that's what the director has to do. Yeah. You've got cues, but you don't have all of the minute details with a book. So I would love to see it be a film, because it's got all that roller coaster of emotions, and it is an inspirational tale, and there's a good ending to it. So kind of like Forrest Gump, you feel so bad for Forrest going through everything that he had to go through, but you cheered him on and you were so happy in the end, even though the end was sad. There was such happiness in that ending.
It's bittersweet. The other night I told you, I read the last 100 pages again. Right from that last Saeed confrontation. Is that how you say his name, Saeed?
Saeed. Again, based on a real character. I don't remember what his real name was, but he was the Persian prince.
Beware the Persian prince. In the book, your character of Mary Wagner had one thing in common, according to you, the need to be loved and the need to be wanted. Now, why did Betsey feel that way?
Betsey had beautiful parents, very well-to-do.
Yes.
Um, but at that time, mental illness was kept hidden. People didn't bring that out. So anybody that had a child with mental illness usually put them away in a facility, and most of the time didn't come and visit. Yeah. That was my experience in our nursing home. We had so many patients there, and very few of the parents came. So it was almost an embarrassment. So I think that Betsey also felt that growing up. And could you imagine being taken out of your home and put in a facility for somebody else to watch over you?
Betsey had this like intuitive connection, her feeling, her ability to feel. Tell me about that.
Even though she had mental disabilities, she was very aware of her surroundings and wanted nothing more than to please the people that were taking care of her. Mm-hmm. And she had this inner light that she could understand truly the pain of those around her. And she would almost apologize for everyone, or would understand how they were feeling and take on those feelings herself. She was extremely empathetic. It's why she understood who I was and over accommodated me. The pain that I was going through, she felt my pain. She understood that I didn't want to be there. She understood that it was hard for me. But she would always make me feel really good about it. She did always say that I was her best friend. Yes. And it was so hard to hear that.
Mary's mom in the book, maybe your mom, I don't know, but she was so busy and she was so career driven. And she had a lot going on. As you said, there were 10 children in the family, and there was always something breaking down and something happening. So when it came to dishing out love or affection, she did love you.
Yeah, there are stories that I could have included in the book. My mother in the book was so attentive to all of us girls and tried to make sure that we had music lessons, that we knew how to play the piano, or singing lessons, or she had this dream that all of my sisters and I would be a singing group. And so we were raised in a Catholic school, and so we even cut a record.
Yeah, did you?
Yes. So my mother was very involved. It's just that she was very short on showing her emotions. And I see. Very successful person. Yeah. Maybe that had something to do with it.
You write, and your phrasing is quite interesting, and that's why I enjoyed reading the book, one of the reasons, and I enjoyed your metaphors, the similes, your comparatives, and your descriptions. It's essential, if you're right, you got to go off and address visually what's happening, or any of the senses, but sometimes you would throw a metaphor in there that was one of that particular time frame. And what was the time frame of your book?
From 1967 to 1980. That was the time span.
Yeah, that's
a lot of time to cover.
Yeah, especially in your teenage years. So what was your state of mind when you wrote this book?
I had a lot of guilt and shame. Guilt over what I had done to Betsey, that I never resolved that. She had died before I ever was allowed to go back or say, hey Betsey, hey, where are you today? I'm so sorry that I never said goodbye, or so I had guilt over those things. And then, which of course, when you have guilt, you feel shame. So I needed to just make my confession. And it was also a promise. I I made to God. I needed forgiveness. And I'm sure I'm over exaggerating the feelings, that the real feelings. I always tend to over exaggerate everything. And my perception is much greater than probably what it was. But I told God that this would be my way of asking for forgiveness, writing down my sins. Yeah. And the only way your sins can be forgiven is if you ask for them to be forgiven. And the only way your sins can be forgiven is if you confess them. The book was my confession.
Is it okay with you if I read your description of the doctor?
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't visited this in a long time, so I'd like to hear it.
It's so funny. And a lot of times I would just stop and laugh, and then I'd like to go back and read it again. This book is uniquely you. It's written how you talk, in the vernacular in which you speak, which is nice, because you didn't try and dress it up and play princess or play I'm a writer. I didn't lord it over people, but
that's for sure.
Mary refers to the nurses as ghost ladies because they appeared to be ghost ladies, and as a child that brought back memories right away. You'd see people and think, that guy looks like a pastor walking around. It's just some guy wearing black, and as we got older, that everybody wearing black was Johnny Cash. Right. And then the nuns were penguins because of the white and the black, comparatively. Now, one of my favorites was when you described a doctor, the main doctor at the nursing home, and I'm just going to read this. He was the nursing home doctor and the tallest human I'd ever seen, taller than the giant at the freak show. He was so tall that the stethoscope around his neck looked like a toy. His hands were so large he could have held a basketball between his thumb and his pinky. He was cloaked in a white coat, the size of a king-size sheet, and wore glasses that hung down on the tip of his huge albino nose. Now, although I'm not sure why, his eyes were always half closed. What really frightened me was the lack of hair. There was not one single strand on his head, his eyebrows, his nose. He was the hairless giant. But when you're a kid, you see stuff like that, you just go, oh, I'm not saying anything about this, but you observe it all. You go, whoa. Well, sometimes it's things, but a lot of times it's people.
I was such a small person in this larger than life home. Yeah. And so I always viewed life from looking up. So everything was much bigger than what it really was. So that was my perception. It doesn't mean that it was right or correct. Mm-hmm. It's just that that's how I viewed it. When I'm writing from a child's point of view, right, which is so much easier for me to write because, I don't have to sound intelligent. Those emotions and those memories flooded back. And to put them into words, it was much easier to do in a child's perspective than in an adult's perspective.
When you write, do you have other authors in mind, or do you just try and just be straight ahead you?
I didn't have any authors that I was trying to emulate or somebody that influenced me. It was more movies. I'm a movie person. So I wanted to write a movie, which is why I included the music in it. Oh, yeah. Because I loved movies. I loved to be able to go into a dark room and I would always go by myself. I just wanted to focus on the dark room and see that larger than life picture up there. And when I was writing, I imagined this film that I could create, and I could create the drama or the sadness or the humor. But the music with it was my background music like you would have in a movie. So that's really what I wanted to emulate more than anything, was for it to read like a movie.
Everything I do is in terms of music, and I have a song in my head at all times. Sometimes it's just fun nothingness, but throughout my life, I've always had music in my head. It's funny, like three weeks ago, and I was clicking around on YouTube channel on my television, and it said the hits top 100 of 1977 or 78, and they'll play like 10 seconds of each song. From those 10 seconds, I'm like, oh, and it's like my brain was like exploding. I took a sheet of paper and started writing stuff down, and stories came back, people came back. Bob, it came back fast, and sometimes they're related to lyrics, and sometimes not at all. When I hear Me and Mrs. Jones, remember that? Me and Mrs. Jones, we got a thing going on. I can remember driving in the snow by Lord's Park, and I went to Cattleman's Burger and Brew restaurant in a nearby town. Throughout your book, one of the most fantastic things which you just spoke of is the music. You made a connection at the end of each chapter, if you get the Kindle version, which I would recommend to people because you can click on that link and it takes you right to a song that beautifully brings out the emotion of the past chapter, or beautifully summarizes, or at least helps explain what's inside Mary Wagner's head.
It's everything for me. It's like chicken soup for my heart and soul.
Yeah.
It is the backdrop to every day. Even the mundane things could be seen on a movie, but there'd be some music going in the background to kind of explain what's going on in my head.
Yeah.
But what I also liked about it was that, and I'm getting better at this with my second book, is that the videos, sometimes I was so shocked when I found a song that I really thought was going to really seal the chapter.
Yeah.
I would link to YouTube on the video, and the video would be like, oh my gosh, that's kind of just what I just wrote.
Oh,
kind
really?
Of on another level, but it was like, boy, if it didn't connect you to what you just read,
Yeah.
I thought it was
The music is
such
so
a God thing.
Very much a God thing, and you know what? The music is so diverse. It's not like Mary's going down this one road. No, there was Christian music. There was contemporary music, popular music, oldies. There was. I love the Bill Withers song that you included.
I know, Lovely Day.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful?
Oh yes, it's how I felt that day. It was such a lovely day.
I think we all should wake up to that every day.
I know, it's a good song.
Right.
Yeah, but that was one of my favorite things about this book, and nobody's ever done it. And when somebody reads my book, I always ask, well, did you listen to the songs?
Yeah.
Well, no, I didn't listen to the songs. I'm like,
Well, they're missing it.
why not? That's my jam. That's kind of what sets me apart from everybody.
When I read your book, I felt the songs were just spot on, with what was going on. So I thought, well, either we're on a similar wavelength, or she's writing for an audience like me.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because it's exactly the way I wanted you to feel. So
Yeah, it's pretty.
So I did something right there.
Well, you did do something right. Yes, you did a lot of things right. But from beginning to end, music triggers amazing memories. Some artists will write up in their attics because it has great light. The light is great, the shadows are perfect. This is going to be good and healthy for me. So they write up in their attic, or they paint, I should say. Other people need certain inspirations, or they need to have certain people around, or inspirers and that type of thing. Is there a place or an environment that you like to write in?
Very blessed to be able to have a second home in Taos, New Mexico. It's not right in Taos, but it's right outside, and it's a very quiet, secluded place. And it's big windows, and the light comes in, and there's no phone or TV, and a lot of times I'm by myself, and there's nothing calling me saying, oh, you've got to go do yard work, or you've got to go answer these emails. It's just totally focused on writing a light and very peaceful, serene setting. Otherwise, my head just can't, it can't focus.
If Mary Wagner, the character, could go back one day in her life within that book and relive it, which one do you think she would want to relive?
Mary Wagner would go back to the day that she left to go to California. She would have taken the time to go to Betsey's house to say goodbye to her. That is the one thing that chokes me up. That I would, if I could do it all over again, if I could recreate the whole book, I could write probably a whole book just on that one moment.
Mary left to go find who she was, I feel.
Mary Wagner left so she could go find herself. She had to get away from the prying eyes and to go figure out life. And Mary Wagner also had to come undone before she could find herself. So I think for everybody, you have to find that lowest point. I mean, if you've got something that you need to change, if it's a drug addiction or alcoholism or, you're stalking people or whatever it is, I mean, you've got to come to the lowest part of your point of your life and before you feel any need to change at all. So, and that's exactly what Mary Wagner did. She went and hid away from the prying eyes of those around her so she could come undone.
Great song. And that's within the book itself.
Good song, huh?
It was my favorite Guess Who song, as a matter of fact. So I think I know the answer to this, but who are you writing for?
I'm writing for anybody that is trying to decide to go right or left or up or down, trying to decide good over evil. Anybody that has that mother issue. We all either have a father or a mother issue. And anybody trying to learn how to live a life and not do it the way that Mary Wagner did it. So somebody looking for a way out and helping them to find it. So I feel as if writing that book, if I could warn someone not to do the things that Mary Wagner did, then I have saved a life. And that's kind of my responsibility as a believer in Christ.
I think it's our responsibility as we all get older, well, at any time in our lives, to retell some of these stories that we've experienced or that you wrote about.
Yes.
Because it may help other people not to make the same mistakes again. They say that about history, and we won't get into all that right now, but you've got to look backwards sometimes to go forward.
And it doesn't matter what you've done. There is always a way to get out of it. There's always forgiveness that can be found. It's like if you think that you're not loved, well, then I recommend Christianity for you, because it's such a good feeling to know that He is always there, loving you, no matter what you do.
In your book, Heavens to Betsey, do you have a favorite part, the part where possibly when people read it, you're hoping they'll bring it up?
There's one story in there that I just had to laugh over and over, just telling the tale. And that was about the two-way mirror. Mary Wagner's so desperate for attention. She's cocktail waitressing one night and runs into somebody that obviously knows her, but she couldn't remember him. And so when this character takes Mary Wagner back to his apartment and shows her this two-way mirror that he had been peering through and she was on the other side, that's even tough to talk about, but there are some memories that are just kind of like, and of course I blew it way out of proportion. It wasn't anything like what it was, but that was kind of, she's sitting here with this guy that obviously she wasn't sure if she was going to come out of this house alive or not. And that's just one reason to buy the book. You need to go buy the book and get to that point. She's trying to make this decision. The character is trying to make this decision. Well, how am I going to get out of here? I really got myself in a jam this time. So Mary Wagner is going to go back out through the front door, see if she, can escape his clutches, or she's going to find a way out here when she escapes to the bathroom. And it was like that game show. Choose door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3, and see what you get. Sometimes you don't get anything.
Yeah.
I went out the bathroom window with my life.
Yes. Okay.
Anyway, it's a good reason to read the book, because that was one of my favorite parts to write.
It is.
One of the parts I liked in your book was when Mary would get into some kind of hot water, eventually she would go back and reference her mom. My mom didn't bring me up to be like this. She brought me up to be a strong and independent, and I will take care of this. I mean, that's one of the things, it's funny in our lives, we go back and we think, I'm not going to grow up to be my parent. But then what happens is we kind of pick and choose what attributes we loved about them. And it might be a little thing, it might be a huge thing. But I like that. It wasn't a book that was just like one-sided about this, and this, but you went back and referenced your mentors along the way. And of course, your parents are great mentors.
Oh, great mentors. Yeah, my mom passed away 7 years ago. And I got to deliver the eulogy. Out of all the brothers and sisters, they chose me. Wow. And at the end, I did say, as much as none of us wanted to be like our mother, we all ended up being just like her. We had little bits and pieces of her, and all of us collectively together are her.
Yeah.
So it's a great legacy. Somebody gave me really good advice. I met this guy. This guy in Taos, he writes music for NCIS. He was there visiting a friend, and I got the pleasure of meeting him. I can't recall his name. It was years ago. But I was telling him about this book.
Yeah.
And I said I couldn't put it. I kept going back and re-editing, and I kept reloading it back up onto Amazon and Kindle, and then I go back and find another mistake, or I wanted to enhance the story a little bit more, and he gave me some really good advice, and he said, stop it, let it go, and move on to your next book. Move on to your next project. So that's how I am with this. No, I am not going back to revisit that. This was my novice way of writing my first book. I learned a lot of great things from it. I learned how to be a better writer in the end. Mm-hmm. So with this new book that I have, I am doing it totally different. Whereas in Heavens to Betsey, yes, I wrote everything down and got to the end. I just kept going and going. And then I would go back and re-edit and go, I can't even follow this. It doesn't make sense. And then I'd have to start all over. So with my second book, I decided not to do that. So I'm taking my time with each chapter and then making sure that it's absolutely correct and it's been spell checked and grammar checked. And then I can move on to the next. But then I find myself halfway through and I have to add new characters to make it cohesive. So I'm kind of going back, but at least I've got a good solid foundation.
It's like one of those moments where you're eating dinner or you're driving in a car, and all of a sudden, bam! It just comes to you. I got to change this part about. You're not even thinking about what you're writing, and it just changes for you. Those are shower moments for me. I've got to make sure I include this, or I neglected to talk about or describe this or that. Or sometimes I think I've got to put more description in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
What do you? You started to talk about this, but what are you working on these days?
I am working on my second book. It's about this woman, of course, here I go again, but this is totally fiction. It's about a woman that has everything. And again, this kind of parallels my first book, that her childhood memories come back to haunt her. And she doesn't want to deal with the horrible and somewhat evil things that happened to her when she was growing up on a commune in Oregon. And so
wow.
She takes life for granted, and she makes a really horrible, selfish decision that ruins her life. She loses everything that she has. And she's on the verge of a mental breakdown and accidentally finds herself in a funeral home while a eulogy is in progress. And she is so fascinated with this eulogy that she decides that she would go and visit random eulogies. And instead of going to counseling, she goes to funeral homes and listens to these wonderful stories of people's lives, or sometimes not so wonderful stories. And so it's there that she learns how to live her life through the stories of the dead. There's just a lot of evil and mystery in this book. You know who done it.
Yeah.
You just want to know why that person done it.
Very seldom do we get in life to hear, you did this, this, and this, and this, and then they did this or that, and you start to put your life together as a whole. There's a lot that happens.
There's a lot that happens, and I did experience many eulogies. Unfortunately, I had to go through several funerals in the last 10 years, and there was actually one where the ex-wife got up and had nothing good to say about the husband. And so it's not always good things that you hear, but you do learn lessons in these eulogies.
Oh, this has been great. Mary, thank you for being with us today and talking about your book, Heavens to Betsey, which you authored and penned. And I want everybody out there to read this because, not just because I say so, but it's a book that took me by surprise, and it's got a lot of depth. It's going to grab you. Mary, where can we find this book if you want to pick it up?
If you just Google Heavens to Betsey, Mary MacDowell, and it's MacDowell. If you just Google that and go to Amazon, it's on Amazon.
It's very reasonable. It's a well-priced book, and I think you're going to enjoy it. It's got the Life's Learning Curve recommendation. All right. Well, Mary, thank you for being with us today. It's so nice to talk with you, and I appreciate your time as well because I know you're a busy person.
It was a pleasure.
I'll see you next time. Thanks. When we think back on our lives, we consider the decisions we made, the directions we moved, how we modified our experiences, both the good ones and the bad ones. Mary Wagner's story today could be very true for all of us. So what is our takeaway today? Well, I think we build the best us throughout our lives. I've always felt that way. And we really do learn from our failures. Probably, in my opinion, even more than our successes. So when we stick our necks out in life, we sometimes become a target. On those rare occasions when you stick your neck out and you realize that you're not alone, you've never really been alone. Makes it all worth it. Thanks to our guest today, Mary McDowell. Please read her book. Give it a look. Heavens to Betsey, Betsey, Amazon.com. For Life's Learning Curve, I'm Paul Hart. Subscribe to Life's Learning Curve at lifeslearningcurve.org and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Podchaser. Life's Learning Curve episode 40 was produced by Paul Hart, technical director Heidi Cerner, supervising producers Sebastian T. Dog, Rusty Stevens, and Steven Scupper. Editor Paul Richards. Audio, as always, Riley Hart. Our podcast content is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. On today's show, special thanks to our guest, author Mary MacDowell. Look for her book, Heavens to Betsey. On Amazon.com, we recommend the Kindle version. You'll love the music. Find our website at lifeslearningcurve.org. Help us grow and continue by liking us on Facebook and listen to us where you're listening right now and practically everywhere podcasts are found these days. Episode 40, Heavens to Betsey, with author Mary McDowell. From all the crew here at the Late Light Shift, I'm Paul Hart, and we will be back soon with more from Life's Learning Curve.
We're clear.